Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gal Bornstein, and I'll be your moderator here today. With me is Rick Sears, Director of Software Development at IntelliDyne. Hello, Rick.
Hello, Gal. How are you?
Good.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the work we do here at IntelliDyne, and more importantly, how we do that work. IntelliDyne is a consulting firm that enables better business performance through innovative technology solutions. We manage the public sector programs that deliver high operational efficiency and measurable value to our clients. We advise, develop, execute effective solutions in cybersecurity, cloud computing, mobile computing, business process management, data center consolidation, enterprise collaboration, and enterprise infrastructure management, and of course, application development. But really, instead of what we do, maybe more applicable is how we accomplish this work. One of the primary techniques we have adopted here for application development work is incorporating the principles of Agile in our software development lifecycle.
Well, today we would like to share a little bit about our perspective on the ways in which Agile can improve return on investment, close the productivity gap, increase communication among project holders, and create a streamlined and adaptive workflow. So I guess what we want to do today in the presentation is have Rick explain how things work. It's going to take about 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll cover how Agile can help with some of the challenges we face with application development. Then we will focus on the benefits of Agile, the tools that are utilized, and things you might want to consider when first implementing an Agile methodology. I encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation using the webinar chat capability. This is on the upper right part of your screen, and we will try to address them as possible. So to start us off, Rick, what is driving the government and industry to change the current way of doing business?
In the last few years, government leaders have really been faced with some unprecedented challenges, whether from unexpected events like Hurricane Katrina or the financial crisis, or even from plan directives such as the healthcare reform or Sarbanes-Oxley. These affect the ability to deliver at a time of flat or decreasing budgets. Federal agencies actually must now learn to innovate with less, given the current fiscal constraints, increasing mission requirements, and rising customer expectations, and of course the ever-evolving landscape of IT. So for federal agency CIOs, that means delivering solutions faster, for less money, and with fewer resources, and taking advantage of evolving technologies and methodologies to accomplish agency mission and support functions more efficiently, while also improving quality and flexibility.
So Rick, with all these new challenges, it seems like there would be a strong focus on improving ROI and reducing waste.
Oh, you're right. In fact, these challenges have led, in part, to the publication of the Federal Information Technology Shared Services Strategy earlier this year. In it, the executive branch has outlined the need to increase the return on investment, eliminate waste and duplication, and improve the effectiveness of IT solutions.
So, Rick, it sounds like what you're saying is that if the government is looking to improve return on investment, how do IT projects typically perform?
History will tell us that as an industry, we really have not been doing very well. As this chart shows, only about a third of IT projects successfully delivered on the initial promises, and nearly a quarter of the projects have been canceled or never used.
Well, this sounds like kind of a failure rate that must be extremely costly.
You're right, and frustrating as well. In my experience, nobody ever wakes up and says, how can I screw things up today? We in the industry all want to work on successful IT teams producing relevant and reliable systems that we can be proud of.
So what has been the problem? I imagine most federal agencies work hard to drive success from their projects. What are the major issues as you see them as an expert?
There are several schools of thought on this. Some themes are consistent throughout, things like lack of user involvement, quality issues with requirements and testing, schedule pressure, last-minute changes, and of course inflexible processes. For those of you in the audience who manage IT projects, do these look familiar? Can you think of any more that you might want to add?
And this is an opportunity for the audience to participate. We're going to allow 10 seconds for people to type into the chat box any Are there challenges that you might think about that are not appearing on the screen right now? Okay, I see one that is very relevant, Rick, so I'm going to go ahead with it. Someone is asking, what about architecture selection? I know of projects that have failed simply because they made a poor choice when selecting the initial infrastructure. What's your response to that,
Well,
Rick?
yeah, actually that's probably right. I've heard of that as well, and this was probably identified, the architecture issue was probably identified too early in the project. It was too late for any real recovery or too expensive to replace. So here, really, Agile can help. As you can see, Agile focuses on lean manufacturing principles of just enough and just in time. The Agile approach accepts that there are many things that we cannot focus on when first initiating a project, and it allows for constant refinements. It places a high value on stakeholders, programmers, managers, and clients, for each group is involved throughout the development effort. Agile produces incremental delivery of actual working software to enable consistent feedback and provide early warning of any issues. Actually, to further illustrate that, let's contrast Agile with a standard Waterfall approach.
Waterfall. Well, it sounds like Waterfall methodologies have been the standard since I bought my first Commodore 64. Why mess with tradition, Rick?
And it's been around for a while. Let me show you. Let's take a look at this chart. Here you'll see a typical project using a classic IT lifecycle. You may have even seen a chart very much like this for one of your projects in the past. Here you see the standard approach: plan, requirements, design and develop, test, deploy, and finally close out. The IT industry has put a lot of effort into surrounding these activities with controls and procedures to ensure each area is performed with the utmost efficiency and quality. The theme of the chart, of course, is, as the orange arrow depicts, indicates that the solution is finalized as you move and the project progresses. This all made clear sense, and for years it was the best approach. However, many things do not work out as they theoretically should.
Sounds familiar. So can you walk us through a typical IT project using this approach, maybe with a little bit of reality included?
Sure. So in any IT project, everybody knows that the greatest chance for failure is, of course, at the beginning. Without adequate planning, the project will be doomed. A strong initiating planning stage is where the answers of the important who, what, where, when, how questions are established. The project timeline is defined. Executive sponsorship is extremely important, as is funding and resources. The basic management approach also should be identified. How will the project be monitored? How will the various risks and scope issues be managed? What reporting is necessary and how often? All of this is an extremely important step, and Agile, of course, continues to support this. Continuing through the remaining steps of the SDLC, first we gather requirements. Clients are often heavily involved in the definition of these requirements. Many times we might use cases and maybe even some high-level design through wireframes and process flows. These requirements are meticulously documented and reviewed, and now they represent the entirety of the entire system to be developed.
So the timeline is planned in this phase as well, correct? We can't determine the schedule before we complete the requirements.
Well, you're right, Gal. That would probably make sense, but in reality, the timeline was established prior to the requirements phase. The budget and schedule were completed in an earlier phase, so the requirements team is now heavily focused on completing the requirements document. We rely on user expertise to define the entire solution and document this clearly, and we actually need to do this at this point in a limited amount of time. The requirements are developed and approved based on how the system can be described at this particular time frame. Once the requirements are approved, they're done, finished. Any changes now will require tight management. So now progressing to the design and development phase is where the real challenging part starts to begin. The technical team works with the approved requirements to document what we call as a system design. The entire system design is now accomplished using very theoretical projections and using whatever best data we have available at the time.
So in other words, this is how the system should work.
Correct. And a very large effort is expended to produce the detailed design of the entire system. Now any changes will affect not only the requirements document but the design document as well. And the time frame for the design document, of course, has already been established. Monitoring of the design phase at this point actually becomes a little tricky. In reality, the design process is often measured very subjectively. Since the complexity of the system components are not often understood until prior work is done, percent completion is based solely on what we've already done. Often a design flaw that will surface very late in the process that affects the entire system, and prior design work will probably have to be redone.
So how can you really tell when the design will be done?
Well, that's a good question. And of course, development is another part altogether. We now have definite requirements that tell us what needs to be done, and a design that tells us how it is to be done. Now all we have to do is build it, right? Not so easy. As the developers begin coding the individual sections of the application, a good team will begin with the most difficult part first. But again, hidden issues are ready to surface at any time. The technical issues that might affect the entire overall design usually will surface after most of the coding is already complete, say maybe during system integration, and could lead to a very large rework effort. Again, since the completion time frame has already been established, managers rely on subjective estimates from the developers to determine the progress. So in reality, the coder really doesn't know how long a task will be until it's done. So Gal, imagine for a minute that I'm your IT manager.
Okay.
And you're the lead programmer.
All right.
I come in your office one day and say, "Programmer, how's it going?"
Well, I guess I can say, fine, on track.
Great. And as we progress through the project, I come in again. "How's it going?"
Fine, on track.
Progress is continuing to move at this point. I come in another day. "How's it coming?"
Fine, on track.
So then we finally get to the magic day end, critical time. I walk in the office. "How's it coming?"
Oops, I just found an issue. We'll be late.
You're going to be late? How late are you going to be?
I don't know yet. I haven't found the issue.
So you understand now, Murphy, who's at this point heavily entrenched in our theoretical project, tells us that the issue will affect a very large portion of the application and render it almost useless.
So, Rick, it looks like we are at the point where the development activity is going to be delivered late.
Yes, and our real challenge is actually late ahead of us. So in our project now, our theoretical project, we finally made it to the point where we're at system testing. The delivery of the software, as we just said, is going to be late, and the project manager really has limited options to make up for lost time. If the time is to be made up in the testing phase, of course quality may suffer. Also, there remains a risk that a system integration issue could affect the application just like a design flaw did in the previous slide.
It looks like we're a bit of a catch-22.
Likewise, the remaining phases provide little room as well. Shortening the user acceptance testing could leave out some important feedback or the time users need to adjust and validate the business processes. Pilot and production phase leave little room as well.
All right, at this point we wanted to ask for a little bit of feedback from you, the participants. As you've been following this hypothetical project in your mind, and I'm sure have different time capsules, how is it going in your mind? Please kind of type into the chat box how much time do you anticipate it would take to get a project done? And let's give the audience about 10 seconds. All right, I see that the answer that we're getting mostly is between 3 to 9 months and mostly 6 to 9 months.
Okay, so great. Now we've gone the 6 to 9 month period from the last time that really a user's been involved. And of course the requirements developed way back then have been interpreted by our technical team.
So it's finally time to show the users the fruit of their requirements work. What are the most likely outcomes in your mind, Rick?
Right, user acceptance testing. So my experience, we really kind of boils down to two reactions. Number one, users come back with, what happened to my application? They're not happy with the final product. Of course, some of the decisions made along the way were made by the technical team, and they might not have provided the best application for the user. Or there may be a module or a section that they really just doesn't do what they thought it should do. Or number two, they look at the application and they come back with saying, hey, I now see the application, can you make some changes? And these change comments can come anywhere from, very ease of use or color changes to something very critical like a business process optimization.
So I guess everyone is interested in asking the question, now what?
Well, that's a good question. Here we are at user acceptance testing. You as a project manager may have planned some time for incorporating the UAT feedback into the application. Although even if that still remains with this project, do you really have time to address anything beyond just a cosmetic change? So here we are. Typically we try to incorporate many of these changes from the user acceptance testing as we can, but because we really can't change anything of significant, the pilot often becomes has the same comments that already surfaced in your user acceptance testing. Removing any of the amount of value we might show from a typical pilot phase. Unfortunately, then the users are presented with an application that you already know has some challenges. Some from the requirements interpretation, others from things we've learned along the way.
So it looks like our application will be late, and from our user's perspective, not quite what they were looking for.
Yes, and now we're stuck with the IOKT, WIKN feeling.
So what do you do, or what do you know better now?
Well, what do I know better? Now that I've seen the application, probably I know more about how the application should work, instead of simply providing the requirements with what I knew when we started. For example, I previously worked on a solution with a large telecom company in England to centralize the mobile phone management for all first responders. We were having a real hard time pulling the feedback from them, and finally, when a scheduled briefing approached, I had no choice but to simply assemble the team back here in the States, and the best we can map out how we thought the business process would flow. I pulled all this together, brought it to the client, and in the first day they nearly threw me out. However, after working on it for a couple of hours, we started making small changes to the process flows and wireframes. By the end of the visit, I returned with the high-level requirements that allowed the team to continue. The client could not come up with an agreement on the requirements from a blank sheet of paper, but after seeing their mocked-up solution, they were able to provide the feedback to make the system more like what they needed. Also, the other thing I learned is if I knew the issues that came along during development, I probably would have directed the team to work on maybe more of the high-value features. That would have helped me not only meet the original delivery time, but again, pull something that the user could use a little better. Thirdly, if I could have received the user feedback earlier, I would probably have provided more relevant application to the pilot community. That way the pilot could be used for what was intended, to validate the system and determine any roadblocks before moving to the production phase.
That makes sense. Well, it sounds like you needed to have a little bit more, agility or being agile.
That's right, Gal. Now, most of you have already heard a lot of buzz about Agile. I'm not going to give you a history lesson here. It's more important to understand that Agile is a form of iterative development. Iterative delivery means that the requirements, design, development, and testing are all completed through many cycles, each relying on the feedback from the previous cycle to provide the requirements for the next.
So it sounds like this way potential development issues can be dealt with when they occur.
Ideally, yes. Each cycle is tested completely, preventing any large test issues from becoming real roadblocks late in the delivery cycle. And users can learn from the application as it is being developed, and the development team has enough time to implement the user feedback. Another feature of the Agile approach is that the team, the analysts, the developers, the testers, and even the clients all become much more effective with each iteration. By the end of the allotted time, the final product is more aligned with the user intent.
Well, Rick, this sounds great, but I've often heard that Agile methodology has very little documentation and process. Some critics even suggest that Agile is just an excuse for undisciplined practices. Agile, they say, largely means no documentation, planning, requirements, schedule, or budget control. That programmers just do whatever they want.
You know, Gal, I've heard that too, but I can assure you nothing can be further from the truth.
Are you sure?
Okay, so here you'll see a graphical portrayal of a typical Agile SDLC, where the Agile activities are mapped actually to the CMMI process areas. At IntelliDyne, we utilize our CMMI quality controls to ensure our Agile practices meet the highest quality standards. In this way, as the chart demonstrates, you can see how IntelliDyne provides complete planning and complete documentation throughout the Agile SDLC.
Okay, Rick. So can you tell us a little bit more about the tools that you use during a typical Agile project?
Sure. We have our daily stand-ups. So the daily stand-ups are really 3 questions. We ask the entire team. The entire stand-up meeting takes 15 minutes. It's not intended to be a status meeting. It's more of a task-specific briefing. Once the team becomes real comfortable in this, the daily stand-up is an essential part of the team communications. We also use something called a Kanban board. It's sometimes referred to as a big visibility chart. These charts really indicate the progress of the team. It serves as the focal point of the daily stand-up meetings. Individual tasks are tracked and monitored on the Kanban board, which provides the team and anybody else with an indication of the development progress. We also use something called a burn-down chart. This is really the way the technical team can keep management informed on the progress. This is a very key tool, and actually I'll spend a little more time on that in a moment. And at the end of each iteration, iterations are referred to as sprint in the Agile terms. We do a reflection to identify any sort of improvements, remove roadblocks and bottlenecks. Team members will come with a list of what went right, what needs improvement, and any suggestions. The list is prioritized, and the improvements that the team feels they can be done for the next sprint are implemented.
Well, what do we have here, Rick? This looks like remarkably like the whiteboard from your office at IntelliDyne.
That may be so, Gal, but actually I can assure you this photo is taken as a demonstration of some of the tools that we've used in one of our recent software development projects. The board itself and the surrounding charts are used to provide a status and resolve issues, and is used as a main vehicle to keep the team informed and involved. The center photo is the Kanban board. On it you will see various post-it notes that represent a development task. Sometimes these are individual requirements or user stories in Agile terms. Here they're actually individual tasks that were divided and estimated by the team before the sprint began. Sprint, as I said before, is an Agile term that addresses the individual iterations. Many sprints make up a software release. We track the progress of the tasks simply by moving the tasks across the board. These are done by the individual team members, usually during the daily stand-up. The final category indicates items that have been completed and tested. The information on the Kanban board can differ between the projects. Here, the yellow tasks are planned tasks. The blue are actually new items that the team needed to focus on. Actually, by identifying these in flight, so to say, we can immediately determine if the impact and plan accordingly. Around the board are other important Agile tools: a burn-down chart, a calendar, and of course the 3 questions for the stand-up team are on the top. So what's displayed here is actually an Agile burn-down chart from one of our projects. The chart is designed to keep the management and the team informed on the progress of the development effort. The total effort for the sprint is indicated in the Y column. Across the bottom is the time initially established for each sprint. As tasks are finished, we simply subtract the effort from the total and update the chart. Any additional items, such as the items on the blue post-it notes, will add to the effort and be reflected appropriately.
Okay, so before the burn-down chart kind of burns up, what's the difference between red and the blue marks that we see here?
Well, actually what you see are 2 sprints. The blue lines indicate the planned effort, and the red line actually shows the actual progress. After the tasks are estimated, the amount of effort that the team can produce every day is indicated in the slope of the planned line. This is often referred to as the team velocity. This chart is updated daily and progress reviewed. Issues preventing a task from completing on time become immediately evident and can be managed appropriately. Another key feature of Agile is the cost of change. As you have hopefully noticed by now, Agile includes the capability to incorporate changes as the application is being developed, keeping the cost of changes constant. However, in a standard waterfall methodology, changes that come near the end of the project will have a larger cost impact, and this will often lead to a recoding of many parts of the application and extensive regression testing. This is very important when you recall when user acceptance testing occurs in the standard approach.
So Rick, sounds like waterfall methodologies are a great way to end up with a soaked budget.
That's right. The waterfall method, user feedback of anything more than cosmetic level is often very costly in time and money.
So to summarize, it sounds like Agile methodologies allow projects to adapt to unexpected challenges as well as decrease the negative impact of changes during development. Rick, what are some of the factors that make an Agile project successful?
Well, actually, if there's anything I'd like you to take away from the presentation today, it's that applications developed using Agile will more closely meet the user's intent, although they may not directly match the original requirements. Ultimately, the iterative software delivery approach reduces risk and produces a higher quality product. Also, it's important to note that the team itself improves as the project progresses. The end of sprint reflections concentrate not only on the development effort, but also on team dynamics, fostering better communications and visibility. The Agile tools, some of which I showed today, enable better communication between the team members and the management staff. Managers are provided with a better look at the actual progress, and issues can be dealt with as they arise.
So, as you've explained it, Rick, it seems that from the user's perspective, if only I knew then what I know now issue is eliminated since the team provides feedback for each iteration.
That's exactly the idea.
So how do you know that a project is right for Agile? How do you get started?
That's a good question. First, recognize that Agile is not a silver bullet. There are many flavors of Agile, and the most successful are typically customized for each organization. So to get started, the first thing I would recommend is that you look closely at your organization. Do you have buy-in from all levels? Agile will significantly change the way the agency will interact with the project team. Is the organization ready for that kind of change? Take a look at the current backlog of projects. Is there one that might best fit an Agile approach? If so, using a small project as a proof of concept will help establish credibility throughout the organization and can lead to better adoption.
So is it best to jump right into the Scrum, or would I benefit from more training?
Oh, I'd highly recommend that outside training. There are many good vendors who can provide an Agile boot camp of anywhere from a few days to a week, and this is really an excellent way to ensure the team initially comes up with a common understanding of the methods and verbiage. To answer the first part of your question, the best candidates for initial Agile pilot include maybe projects that have either a fixed budget or a timeline, but usually not both. Or you might find one where the requirements are either not that well understood or not that well defined. Sometimes you'll find the application already fielded and under enhancement and sustainment status are good candidates. And then once you gain traction, any long delivery project is always a good candidate. As we know, the amount of change and time is often directly proportional.
Well, Rick, we're almost out of time. I'd like to thank you for sharing your insights today and actually open up the forum for some questions from the audience in the webinar world that is out there looking to get some of your insights. So we're going to give a few seconds for people to type in their questions, and I'm already getting one question from a federal government program manager, and he is asking, how do I convince my boss of the financial benefits of switching to Agile? Rick, what do you say to our attendee?
Well, that's a good question. You know, what I would suggest is that by virtue of the fact that you're going to be able to get the right application for the users out there in the right amount of time, that might actually provide as a benefit and something you might want to use when bringing to your boss. Also, you know, Agile methodology does work well in a firm fixed price contract. I've heard folks that have said that that's difficult to do, but really you do get a chance to come up with a defined time frame and a defined cost and get the most that you can possibly get out of that particular request using the Agile approach.
All right, and we have another question here from another program manager at a federal agency, and he's asking, what do I look for in an existing project to determine if it's right for Agile?
In an existing project?
Yes.
You know, actually we had a chance here at IntelliDyne one time to use Agile to dive into a project that was having some issues, and so we did have to actually transfer over to a different methodology, a more agile methodology, in flight, so to say. And what we actually were able to do was to find out that, you know, a particular project that might be struggling with issues, or you may have a lot of unknown in front of you at this point, really benefit from an agile life cycle simply because you'll be able to take little iterations, little pieces of the application, little pieces of what you're looking for, and deal with those iteratively. So as you're developing a database piece, for example, or if you're developing a particular interface and you find that that's a very high-risk piece, hit that first in your first iteration. You may discover a problem there that you solve. It might take you a little longer initially, but that might affect and help you complete it later on. So we've had experience in that, and I do believe that it works pretty well that way.
All right. Rick, I know you're not a politician, but we're having another question here from another attendee that is asking, that's working for a federal agency. What do I tell my boss when my boss says that Agile might be a fad?
Well, that's a good question. You know, first of all, it's not a fad simply because we have seen success. Its adoption is growing. Those of you in the federal community know that actually Agile and more flexible and iterative lifecycle methodologies have been proposed and are being included in some of the standards you're getting from overall federal agencies. I would actually say that if there's a fad in any of this or a fading methodology, it's probably those rigid ones that are more associated with something like Waterfall.
So it sounds to me like it's about being flexible and being able to adapt to a new economy, new requirements, and this is really what this is all about. It's connecting the business impact of the organization to the requirements and making sure that IT is not separate from it. It's actually integrated. Is that correct? You
know, Gal, you must have been listening. I like it. That's exactly what we're trying to get across today.
Okay. Well, this concludes today's presentation. Thank you all for participating. On the screen, you will see Rick's contact information, and please feel free to send any questions or comments to his address or even call his number. Thank you, Rick.
Oh, thank you, Gal, and thank you, everybody else.
Thank you. This concludes today's webinar.